Welcome to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast. And you're very welcome back to the Hawkeye Sidekick Rugby podcast with your host, Mark Kennedy. I'm joined again this week by Liam O'Brien. Liam, how are things?
Hi, Mark. Great weekend of sport and rugby, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it was a sensational weekend with the Challenge Cup and the Champions Cup finals on in Marseilles. So our real focus will be on the Champions Cup final between La Rochelle and Leinster. Very dramatic ending to that, with La Rochelle denying Leinster their fifth European Cup accolade, winning 24-21. We'll have a good review of that fixture. URC playoffs arrive this weekend in earnest, so we'll have a good preview there of the four quarterfinals. And also we'll look at some contract news across the Irish provinces. Suppose, Liam, we'll start with the Stade Velodrome, Marseille, on Saturday afternoon. Leinster, La Rochelle. Again, Liam, I thought it was a magnificent cup final, just for pure tension, drama of it. What were your initial thoughts, I suppose, of the game and how it unfolded?
Yeah, it was a great occasion. A lot of that was because the La Rochelle fans really made it. You know, they definitely certainly outshouted anyway, and the Leinster support, and it was almost like, you know, when Ireland play France, to be honest with you, that sort of intimidating atmosphere. You're going, yep. You know, going to be one of those days already, you know, and of course in that searing heat as well. But you know, overall, they were fully deserved. La Rochelle in every metric that was going, they excelled. You could argue that, like, if they had lost that final, they would be kicking themselves. They had all the opportunities to really, I suppose, in the second half, kick on further. You know, when you own the ball for the last 10 minutes, have that actually steely determination and that heart to literally get over the line and get the victory. Absolutely, I take my hat off to La Rochelle.
Absolutely, it was very brave at the end. But maybe we start from the start. Maybe we can go first quarter, second quarter, and so forth. So, I mean, the first 20 minutes here, Liam, and to be fair to Leinster Rugby, they started very quickly, trying to secure territory and also attacking play. And to be fair to Jonathan Sexton and the Leinster team, yielding two quick penalties in the 5th and 9th minute. Again, advantages here due to La Rochelle offsides. But again, I think from a Leinster perspective in that first 10 minutes, it's a very promising start in, you know, hot conditions. But I mean, they were on front football.
Yeah, absolutely. Leinster were like very dynamic in those first, I suppose, 9-10 minutes to get that 6-0 lead. You know, La Rochelle were straying offside. Two easy penalties, I suppose, really there for Johnny Sexton. But I suppose really, you know, after that 10 minute, then we had La Rochelle, actually Raymond Rule, really beautiful try. I suppose a beautiful hands really from Dylan Leeds, and he basically took like three Leinster players out of it. And at that stage, people seem to forget this. It wasn't that La Rochelle just suddenly got the lead at the end. They actually got the lead at that point, you know, briefly, albeit, you know. But yeah, that was probably one of the turning points, you know, the first 10 minutes. And then suddenly La Rochelle were in their stride, and they were well back in the game.
I thought it was one of the big, massive turning points of the game, given how the first 10 minutes had gone, Liam. How much in the ascendancy Leinster Rugby had been, dominating territory, looking to really exploit line breaks, likes of Ringrose, Henshaw, very prominent early on. And then now, in fairness to La Rochelle, they set their mantra out fairly quickly, very aggressive line speed defensively. And Wayne Barnes, very, very observant, was pinging for offsides here. But that Raymond Rule try, it shouldn't have come as a big surprise for Leinster, given some of the opening exchanges where La Rochelle were looking to attack out wide, create width. So Lid, I think, was phenomenal. But maybe kind of exposed maybe a little bit of the injury concerns over Tyke Furlong a little bit, given that Jimmy O'Brien really, you know, had to come inside and really try to support Furlong on that particular lead offload. I mean, Raymond Rule, phenomenal pace, burns Keenan for the try. But I thought that was maybe a bit of a body blow for Leinster, coupled with, I think there was a penalty that Sexton did go for the corner, and you could see collisions again in terms of La Rochelle, the aggressive defensive line speed, smashing Leinster players in contact, ultimately turning over balls. So I think two key instances there were, if Leinster felt this was going to be an easy afternoon, La Rochelle certainly probably setting the marker down fairly early for Leinster that this would be a complete and utter competitive 80-minute performance required. And I suppose we can get to the second quarter here. You know, West adds the conversions. Suddenly, Leinster being in the ascendancy now 7-6 down. But in fairness to Leinster, again, more composure. Where La Rochelle, you'd probably say, were lacking a little bit in terms of not rolling away. There was a few offside calls again. Penalty count was starting to creep up a little bit in La Rochelle. And Jonathan Sexton given a few regulation penalties to kind of open that gap up again to 12-7 at half time. What were your initial impressions there in that second quarter, Liam? Just given 6-0 to Leinster in that quarter.
Yeah. Well, as you said, to be fair, 6-7 down, they came back to 9-7 there. And, I suppose we have to remember too, La Rochelle, the way that half ended was quite strange. La Rochelle were camped on the Leinster line.
Yeah, exactly.
for the 5 minutes before half time. And then suddenly turned around that Leinster got a penalty down the other end after La Rochelle straight offside, and suddenly it was 12-7. So, that was, I suppose, key as well. Leinster were also kind of held up before the line as well. But you also have to say that it was a dubious decision in the first instance in the La Rochelle scrum that gave that decision to Leinster as well.
Exactly. There was also a bit of crossing as well from Antonio as well on one of those penalties for Sexton as well in that opening period. So La Rochelle's maybe attacking cohesion probably not quite there. But I suppose whatever words were said by Ronan O'Gara, Donnacha Ryan and the rest of the management to the team, it certainly kind of helped significantly. West tacking on a penalty on the 43 minutes. But again, kind of Leinster kind of came back. Again, a little bit more composure from Leinster here with Sexton adding two penalties in the 48th and 53rd minute to kind of open that gap up again, which was, we thought at the time, I think, Liam, pretty significant. We were kind of on WhatsApp kind of pinging away. But then I think the second major turning point kicks in on just before the Pierre Bogaerts try. That Brice Dulin attempted drop goal, and then the subsequent kind of play from Sexton and Keenan, not really clearing their lines, really. I thought that was a pivotal moment in the game. It gave La Rochelle massive field position to really expose their attacking maul, which, in fairness to Leinster front five, had subdued for quite a bit of that first half. But I thought it was maybe another kind of significant turning point in this game.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah, and obviously then subsequently you had the La Rochelle maul and the Bogaerts touchdown. So it was like they never could put them away. They could never get that kind of substantial lead. Now, in the second half, when Leinster had penalties, they never looked to kick to the corner for line-out mauls either, which they probably kind of were figuring that, let's take the 3 points, let's just keep building the lead and scoring when we get into their half, rather than possible kicking and not really getting anywhere. But and certainly, West, of course, was on point with his kicking in the game. I suppose that silly yellow card there. Oh, wow, man! Like, it's the softest yellow card. If you're going to get a yellow, you may as well do something for it. Like, but to trip Jamison Gibson Park and to basically pretty much hand a penalty back to Leinster, that was so silly, And I suppose, look, after that, then they were in the ascendancy, La Rochelle, for pretty much the rest of the game.
Yeah, Thomas Levault. Can you imagine, Liam O'Brien, if La Rochelle had lost this match? That bus trip home from Marseilles to La Rochelle, or train or plane ride, my God, I think Thomas Levault, really could have played his last game for La Rochelle. It was such a stupid yellow card straight after the Bogaerts try. And I think Pierre Bogarit was probably one of the standout players for La Rochelle and really probably exposed Leinster a little bit in terms of their line-out set piece because, I mean, Bogarit was absolutely phenomenal. But 4 minutes later to then give that advantage back, that 14 players in that stifling heat in Marseille to Leinster. And I mean, as you say, Ross Byrne tacks on the penalty. He replaces Sexton at this stage in 66 minutes. Again, it opens that up to a 4-point gap. You'd think then maybe Leinster will kind of close this out and really kind of execute to kind of close out the game. But I don't know about you, Liam, but I felt it was very conservative of Leinster throughout. I mean, it was very attritional, very kind of points orientated, but their kicking game really did arrest an awful lot of possession and territory away from Leinster during the game, particularly that last 30 minutes. They kicked an amount of ball away. And Brice Doolan became a very prominent figure in terms of his kicking, was absolutely on point, and really didn't give the Leinster back three a sniff, and really did set up territory for La Rochelle to really launch attacks. Even at 14 players, La Rochelle were the team on the ascendancy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I suppose when you can keep an attack like Leinster quiet, offer incredible attacking potential themselves, like they did offer in the game with the likes of Dylan Eds and Raymond Rule as well, and Brice Doolan, a classy back three in their own right, has to be said.
Yeah.
But and then I suppose Leinster just couldn't get out of their own 5 meters, 10 meters for the rest of the game, And again, you I suppose you could say that there was maybe Alan Atoa, was penalised there at one stage where maybe it could have went the other way and they could have got out. They only needed one opportunity, really. One massive kick out is all they need. Clearance kick is all they needed to get away and get the win, but it didn't come for them.
Yeah, that scrum, I think you mentioned, it was a very 50-50 call. On another day, that could have gone Leinster Rugby's way, and then all of a sudden, as you say, you get cleared up the pitch, exit out of your own 22, and then really kind of killed clock at that stage. But I suppose the last 10 minutes here, Liam, was incessant pressure off La Rochelle. They turned down multiple penalty opportunities. They trust their process. I suppose hearing their forwards coach Donncha Ryan in the background saying about how direct you should be to get to the try line. And it was ballsy brave, I thought, Liam, to be perfectly fair, particularly with 10 minutes to go, that they kept turning down the penalty opportunities, really sensing that moment. I suppose learning from mistakes of maybe the previous year in their grand final appearances, playing to lose in Champions Cup final, top 14, maybe just seize the moment, seize the day mentality. They weren't going to leave this unturned, really. And to be fair to Leinster, to a man, that was incredible pressure that La Rochelle were building phase upon phase upon phase. And we haven't even mentioned Nick Skelton yet. I mean, Skelton plays the full 80 minutes after such a lengthy layoff. Skelton was absolutely phenomenal, I thought, Liam.
Oh, man. What a man mountain he is. And he in full flight, he's almost impossible to stop as well. Yeah, as you said, to actually come back from injury, to play something like 13 minutes a week before, and then to give that tour de force performance, incredible. But in that last section of the game, really Leinster were also pretty much at yellow card territory. It's mind-boggling that they didn't concede a yellow card themselves. But there was a sense of inevitability in those last few minutes that La Rochelle. I think it was more a question of, would they get a try where it was kickable or not, out in the very corner, That's because that's really all that was in question at that stage.
I was thinking an awful lot about American football during the last 5 minutes, where Leinster being better suited just to give the try away and have 5 minutes then to really manufacture a score, even to make it 24-all, to give themselves time, because it was valiant defensive efforts, but all required was one little mistimed tackle around the fringes to allow La Rochelle to score. And I mean, the clock certainly was not Leinster's friend when we were hitting to 77, 78. Defensively, they had to be absolutely spot on. As you said, Liam, you could argue there was, I think Caelan Doris kind of came in, deliberate kill the ball. There was a few other instances where maybe was Barnes kind of tempted to, kind of give a yellow card, but it never happened. But I think La Rochelle just literally, they knew themselves their last 20 minutes. I think Ronan Agar was very at pains to mention it in the post game. Leinster really do an awful lot of their damage first 20, but La Rochelle do an awful lot of their damage in the last 20. So they really did trust the process here, Liam, to get, the necessary phase. And I mean, as I say, it's ballsy out from La Rochelle, just in terms of phase after phase after phase. A mishandle here. The cup season in the European Champions Cup is over. So, I mean, from La Rochelle, the ice cold composure to continue to really kind of camp in that Leinster line. And I think for Arthur Ritere, I mean, again, spots a gap, ring rolls a little bit kind of imbalanced, and then literally his arm basically stretches over for the touchdown just in front of Michael Alatoa. 79 minutes, game's up for Leinster. But I just thought from a Leinster perspective, going back to the point, maybe, I don't know, if you had American football head coaching head in it, maybe concede a score and then kind of come back, because, they could have manufactured something. But again, there was no time left in the shot clock. And I mean, it's such a magnificent win for La Rochelle, there, because I think Brian O'Driscoll had mentioned maybe there's 10 seconds left that there will be a restart, but I think all the La Rochelle subs and management had gone on the pitch at that stage. But
look, they had some chances, all right. That's for sure. But I think it was more that La Rochelle did a right job on them, basically, in terms of defensively and offensively. And I suppose a masterclass in coaching from Rog himself. It's interesting that he was mentioning that he saw weaknesses this season in Leinster, in particular losses, and how he could turn that to his advantage in the final. Yeah, I suppose, I mean, you could say, scrum time, even though you have that Irish scrum there, there's a kind of a slight underbelly there. And obviously as well, Sexton was he was targeted throughout the game, and that's obviously what you do anyway by the opposition back row. But for Leinster to be kept tryless and really, you'd be scratching your head as to how many actual opportunities they had in the game. They didn't, to be honest with you, really, apart from maybe in that 5 minutes from the second half. They did a great job. They were very dangerous out wide, La Rochelle too, and wow, I mean, incredible performance, really.
Yeah, exactly. I think you now see from Leinster Rugby's perspective why they've acquired someone like Jason Jenkins for next season. I think physicality, sheer brute force, it's still a massive key ingredient for winning a European Champions Cup. I think we've seen that now kind of in terms of, I'd even start from Exeter Chiefs to Toulouse to now La Rochelle, that your real solid foundation of any team is your pack, but now really more so than anything else, flair, creativity will get you plenty. But when it comes to cup finals, your set piece, your pack battle, it was huge during this game. And not to say that the Leinster pack didn't have their moments here, but once again, La Rochelle had the measure of Leinster, particularly after minute 50. I felt this game was kind of, a momentum had completely shifted. And I think that Sexton, Keenan passage of play, particularly for the Bugaritz try, really kind of was the epicenter there. Again, La Rochelle sensing their moment, really exploiting their attacking maul. And then you could see body language a little bit in Leinster Rugby kind of dip a little bit. And again, you're pulling off likes of Tyke Furlong, Andrew Porter have gone 60 minutes. I think from that perspective, there will be the need to maybe kind of look at things a little bit in terms of pack from a Leinster Rugby perspective. But I think it's a magnificent story for La Rochelle. When you consider in 2014 here, Liam O'Brien, that La Rochelle were in the Pro D2. And then 2017, top 14 semi-final loss to Toulon under Golazzo, who then decides to go to Toulon. And then you had the John O'Gibbs and now Ronan O'Gara. That's sea change. I mean, but I suppose Golazzo's impact, he brings in the likes of Vito, who wasn't in the starting lineup due to injury. The likes of Antonio, Sassi, Aldrit, Bugaritz. Again, they've been building this side up for many a year, and I think, to be fair, that northwest quarter of France, that outpost, I've seen so many media reports about La Rochelle, but I mean, you can see the celebrations, Liam, from La Rochelle immediately after the full-time whistle, and particularly when the team arrived back to La Rochelle. To me, it looked very akin to Munster Rugby, their first European Cup triumph. I mean, the scenes were absolutely phenomenal, and you can only see great things happening here for La Rochelle in terms of the rugby club, the fan base, and also the player group as well. When you consider that Tenny Thomas is going to join from Racing 92 next season, I think it's going to attract an awful lot more players to La Rochelle.
Yeah, there's some example of a club really from where they've come from, and even we have to remember last season. You could argue again that they kind of blew it against Toulouse in the final as well. So and I did think I had said last week that I always felt that this was almost their last chance, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You just have to take your chance when it's there. Now Roger's been talked about as the potential England coach. Obviously he can take any job he wants, but he's going to stay at La Rochelle for many a year to come, because what he's built there and what they're building as a club is very much something special, and it is akin to Munster and Munster's journey almost to the top. And I also think it's great to see just the rugby, the European Cup, Heineken Champions Cup. It really does have a huge amount of potential winners there, every year as well. It's unlike a lot of other competitions. It is multiple winners, very open in terms of who can actually lift the cup.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think it's good for competition that a new name comes in to get their name on that coveted trophy. No disrespect to Leinster, but I mean, this really does open the door again, very a la Exeter Chiefs, whereby it's a regional club run very well. The players, supported, the cohesion there. It is a very much a case study for any other European Cup team that really wants to strive to get to that pinnacle. It's achievable. If La Rochelle or Exeter Chiefs can do it in the last few seasons, why can't anyone else? So I think from that perspective, it's a great win for tournament organisers. I think we may see renewed investment on most clubs here to kind of get to that level. But I suppose going back to Leinster Rugby here, I mean, denied, you can say it's cruel in terms of how it's all panned out. But I suppose from Leinster Rugby, they're not a bad team overnight. But Liam, I've seen an awful lot in terms of URC, competitiveness. But in terms of this squad of players, particularly with Leinster Rugby, have they really been put to the pin of their collar in this European Cup campaign? The answer would be no, and I think it maybe cost them a little bit on Saturday, particularly went to the closing last quarter, that maybe that familiarity in terms of how to win kind of a tight, close game, maybe for some of the players, maybe kind of that composure maybe eluded them. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would, of course, sure. I mean, they weren't tested at all, and it's ironic. It'll only be the next probably 2-3 weeks that they will get tested when they played the South African sides, who can also offer that sort of sheer physicality. In terms of where they're actually lacking, they're not that far off, but they're lacking a bit of a dog second row, a kind of a Nathan Hines, Brad Thorne type, which while they might be hoping it's in Jason Jenkins, we'll wait to see. Also, probably, let's be honest, but another kind of a loose head prop is clearly required as well. So they're not that far off, but they certainly have a lot of thinkings to take care of and to kind of iron out if they're to come back next season, because there's no guarantee next season with the World Cup year that Leinster, with the majority of their squad, are going to find it easy in the European Cup.
Exactly, new season. Now I know the lure is Dublin will be the location, the venue of the Cup final weekends for the Challenge Cup and also the Champions Cup finals. But I mean, you throw in some of the South African teams in the mix here, Liam. Things got an awful lot more difficult for everyone. And I think there will be English teams that will be looking to kind of really make statements of intent again in Europe. Same with France as well. You'll have your Toulouse, you'll have your Racing 92s. It's completely competitive. But I think from Leinster's perspective, not a bad team overnight. I think URC teams, I think, will beware, because there will be kind of reviews from Leinster's rugby hierarchy in terms of this cup final and what lessons to be learned. So I think for the vast majority of the URC, it's bad news, I would think, there. But as you say, it's probably pack-wise that extra maybe 3-4%, particularly in that front five, to really build up that squad depth and that physicality. I know Joe McCarthy came on late, and again, it's very difficult for a rookie to come in that situation to really make an impact. But I think that grunt force, that physicality, like the Vardys, these sort of guys, maybe was completely missed, on a game like Saturday where you really needed guys to really front up. And I think in terms of Skelton, in the second row was the dominant force there, but also in the back row as well. Leinster did have moments with Van der Fleer, Conan, particularly, and Doris. But I think, to be fair to Liebenberg, likes of Aldrich as well, and Haddad as well. I mean, they had their moments as well. I mean, Aldrich, I thought, was absolutely superb here, Liam, again, in terms of his leadership, his ball carrying. From a Leinster perspective, there's no disgrace be beaten by the phenomenal La Rochelle pack. But again, if you could talk about perfect setup going into a final, again, this Leinster team were well rested after the Toulouse performance in the semi-final. Had their squad players out against Munster Rugby, getting a superb performance. So, I mean, the lead up here would have been perfect. They also prepped in terms of South Africa, that tour as well. An awful lot of them were in Dublin prepping for European Cup. So I think preparation-wise, no excuse. But I think maybe that kind of sharpness in terms of closing out games, because there was a bit of a nervy performance off Leinster here from probably about minute 20 on, in terms of realising that La Rochelle were going to be in this to the bitter end, and maybe a little bit of composure issues here by not being fully tested. And I'm not saying in terms of URC, but even collectively during the season. You see La Rochelle, they had, good wins against the likes of Bordeaux. In terms of Racing 92, that was a real blood and thunder tie. People could criticise La Rochelle for the performance, but it was a really gritty performance to get that over the line. They were battle hardened, whereas I think the Leinster rugby squad definitely may not have had that, and was probably definitely a distinct disadvantage. I suppose going back to Rog then, as I said, the world is his oyster at the moment. It's a phenomenal achievement of Ronan O'Gara if you look at his coaching resume, really, when you consider his playing career on Munster Rugby, but now likes of Crusaders with Super Rugby successes, and now he has success with La Rochelle. As you say, the coaching stock value continues to soar for Ronan O'Gara now, doesn't it?
Yeah, incredible stuff. Like, he's a winner literally everywhere he's went. He's probably the best start of any coach ever in terms of professional rugby. and it's like, what does he do from now? I feel he will certainly stay at La Rochelle for the remaining few years, and he's bought time, which coaches, managers really nowadays in any sport don't have. He's bought his 3 or 4 years, quite frankly, is what he's bought now. And I think he's going to be a lot more successes coming away anyway. In terms of long term, I think he'll be Ireland coach is where he'll go. He will not go for, should I say, the almost poison chalice of Munster. No, he's certainly international coaching at that level is something that I think that Raj will go with. I think that the La Rochelle performance, there was almost a stamp of O'Gara on it, wasn't there? There was just he would have alluded to himself that they showed the heart, that he, and the honesty, I suppose, the honesty performance as well. That was surely a mark of La Rochelle. Sometimes the best team doesn't always win the competition. Leinster, would agree, were by far and away the best team. We have to remember La Rochelle were dire against Racing in a semi-final, but they performed on the day, and that's ultimately what it comes down to.
They still found a way. They still found a way to win against Racing 92. And in fairness to West, we were very critical of him at the preview, thinking, will he have his kicking boots on? And in fairness to him, nailed the first penalty, and the first conversion after the Ruel try. I think after that, then that kind of worry dissipates really. So I think to a man, they back themselves, they back each other, and I suppose really is helped. I mean, it's that evolution from like Golazo all the way to the John O'Gibbs. Ronan O'Gara comes into that backroom. You can see the steeliness and the determination. And I think this La Rochelle success, I mean, O'Gara gets huge benefit and accolades for getting the team over the line. But again, there's been an awful lot of good work done here in La Rochelle over previous years since 2014 to get to this pinnacle. And I mean, to be fair to La Rochelle, it's a magnificent success. And I think for O'Gara, he's not going back to an Irish province. The next level is Test match rugby for him. So it will be very intriguing, I think. I don't think it's just Ireland in the picture here. And I think Ronan O'Gara is going to be a very shrewd and astute man. And once that moment happens and an opportunity arises, which he wants to really kind of sink his teeth into, I think he will be a massive success for whoever he takes on. I don't see Munster anywhere near securing O'Gara after this. I think that ship has sailed now. I think he's now looking at greater accolades in the game now, and really building, I suppose, La Rochelle for the next season or two. But after 2023, again, Liam, as you well know, there's resets, associations, head coaches will depart, and then there's head coaching positions in Test match rugby teams, the big teams. Not naming names, but maybe, England or South Africa or other teams like that, maybe kind of getting into that realm of looking for new head coaches after that cycle again. So there's endless opportunities here for Ronan O'Gara, but I think Donncha Ryan as well, superb job, backroom staff wise. I think it's been a marvellous week for O'Gara. Played it perfectly. Brice Doolan at full back. The reinstatement of Doolan, I think, was absolutely a master stroke. Really did control that back three exchange. And then literally the tactics, as you say, like Dante, real physical ball carrying here. And also creating a bit of width out wide as well to vary that as well, because Rog did pick out Connacht rugby in the first leg of that last 16, and also the Leicester Tigers game in certain periods that he had seen things in videotape that La Rochelle could exploit. And I don't think this is an upset by any set or shock. People are kind of claiming that this is a shock. To me, it wasn't. Last week we'd kind of mentioned it, and I thought it was very much a 50-50 game. And if you look at the stats, Liam, possession 61% La Rochelle. Meters gained 636 over Leinster's 415. Defenders beaten 16, Leinster 7. Passes 150 versus 125 Leinster. Successful carry 16 versus 7 from Leinster. So I think, to be perfectly fair, on the day, La Rochelle, I think, are worthy winners, and congratulations to them. Liam, we may switch to URC. The inaugural playoff series kicks off this weekend. We're down to the last 8. Again, all very exciting with 4 games on tap. We have Leinster versus Glasgow Warriors, DHL Stormers versus Edinburgh. We have the Irish Interpro between Ulster and Munster at Kingspan. And then we have the Vodacom Bulls versus South Sea Sharks in a South African local derby match as well. The way the playoffs are working here, ladies and gentlemen, is if games are tied after 80 minutes, there will be similar to the playoffs in the Champions Cup, 10 minutes either side. And then it'll be determined on number of tries. And if that doesn't separate teams, we're on to our place kicking competition. But I think, Liam, looking at these fixtures, maybe we can start off with Munster and Ulster in Kingspan. Given the comments of Conor Murray this week in terms of the Leinster performance and kind of closing that off, do you see any chance for Munster Rugby here of pulling an upset against a very revitalised and energised Ulster Rugby outfit?
Well, would it be an upset if Munster were to turn them over? We've beat them twice this season, and the only team to beat them at home in the URC quite recently too. Yeah, so I mean, I think you'd have to be confident for Munster going up to the Kingspan. Now, what we have to remember, last time Ulster were without Vermeulen, Henderson, Billy Burns somehow was sacrificed for Mike Lowry as a 10. So those sort of things were quite strange, and they certainly helped Munster along to the victory. But it was also a very good performance that Munster played that night in Ravenhill. And we're going to probably have quite a powerful replacement bench in the likes of Byrne, Coombs and Conway back as well. So things are looking up for us in that sense. I think that we kind of it comes to the stage of the season where mentally, I think Munster potentially, I would say, have that bit more about them than Ulster. There's still that brittleness there, and there's still those question marks about Ulster more than Munster at this stage.
I think it's a very intriguingly set game. I'm kind of looking at some of the fixtures here, and maybe the Bulls Sharks is a very kind of 50-50 matchup. But I think here that Munster Rugby is a very much a 50-50 call. As you say, Munster had a good record over Ulster Rugby this season, home and away wins in regular season. There has to be a response off this Munster Rugby side. I expect a big performance off Munster Rugby. And to be fairness to Munster Rugby and Dan McFarlane, this project he's been building now for the last season or two, a loss here against Munster Rugby, I think question marks will start to surface here amongst Ulster Rugby supporters in terms of where is the direction where Ulster Rugby is going. I mean, they're looking to strive, like Munster to a certain extent, to get very deep into competitions. Now, unfortunately, against Toulouse, that last 16 was just rotten luck in terms of who they picked in that last 16. But I think in the URC, this has been something they've really pinpointed and they've been very prominent on. And I think it's massive pressure on Ulster Rugby, I think more so than Ulster or Munster, to get that result on Friday night.
Ulster were being talked about as potential European champions there, through the season when they topped their group. And yeah, granted, they were lucky to get Toulouse. But at the same time, they lost to Toulouse, and then they probably didn't recover in performance. And then next up was Munster in the Kingspan, and that was a performance where I suppose they turned up really in the second half. They kind of almost awoke. So yeah, I think if they basically went out of Europe like that, and if they go to the URC, they certainly questions will be asked about Ulster, because they have some big name players in many positions there. From being the form team in the URC over a lot of the course of the season, it would be an absolute disaster for them. And this kind of project, you'd have to question where it's going next.
So I think there's an awful lot on the line here for Ulster and also for Munster. And I mean, there's some fascinating battles, but I'm looking at the three-quarters battle here, Liam, potentially. And this is if Damien Delende returns to fitness. I think after the Leinster Rugby performance, I'd say he will be rushed back, certainly given the ineffective performance of the three-quarters against Leinster. But I mean, you have Ulster's Stuart McCluskey playing outstanding rugby at the moment, along with James Hume. And then you'd have the likes of Delende at 12, Farrell at 13. I mean, monster ball carriers, the four of them. And I mean, weather set fair in Belfast on Friday night. I expect tries in this game, and I think the three-quarters combinations for both sides are going to be pretty instrumental in where this game is going to go.
McCluskey and Hume have been, in my view, head and shoulders above the whole Delende-Farrell combination this season, Yeah. And they've gelled. It's very simple. They've gelled, and McCluskey has been the ball wrecker, the bruiser, and Hume with the silky running skills, and they've worked a treat. And certainly the two guys are definitely thereabouts in terms of to put themselves up for Irish selection. And then you have Balakoom, who to my mind definitely should be on one wing, obviously with Lowe on the other for Ireland. You have the Mike Lowry effect is going to be there. Billy Burns has been a very good link out half this season for Ulster. He's actually had a very, very good season if you were to look at it in the context of like the other Irish out halves. And then of course you have, again, when we talk about the pick of the forwards this season in the URC, I mean, you're talking about Jack O'Donoghue, but you'd also talk about Nick Timoney. Exactly. He's just been absolutely incredible, and he's one of these teams again that has to surely be like on the way to New Zealand. So the matchups in the back row is also going to be fascinating for myself.
Likes of Alan O'Connor as well, that second row battle as well. I think there's so many intriguing battles, and I think the Billy Burns, Joey Carberry, we're assuming Carberry will start at 10, Billy Burns 10 as well for Ulster Rugby, and I mean that's almost like a trial match to decide who's really going to be the backup here for Sexton in the New Zealand Summer Tour. And I would expect maybe one of them to, depending on how this performance goes on Friday night, to be probably in that pecking order, maybe second in the pecking order for that New Zealand, one of the tests, maybe the second or third test for New Zealand. So I think there's huge ramifications here I think we mentioned it last week in terms of the review of the Munster Rugby performance, that I think a few Munster Rugby heads here that have any aspirations of going down to New Zealand with Ireland really have to kind of deliver now in terms of this Ulster Rugby fixture, because otherwise you could see some household names maybe kind of not going on the flight, given kind of concern on form.
Yeah, and can I highlight something that I would be quite concerned about actually for this weekend is our scrum. Specifically, kind of our front row. I think they're going to get absolutely pummeled, to be quite frank about it. They have a very tasty front row, great scrummaging front row as well. And yeah, so that's obviously a concern for me. And you'd wonder, will they just kind of, will Munster be starting certainly with Ryan because of that?
I think it may have to happen. You can't give 369 points away in terms of your scrummaging, your set piece. These playoff games, as we've seen with the La Rochelle Leinster game, are won on very fine margins. I think to be fair to Munster Rugby, they have to really set the stall out early and look to be as competitive as they can, particularly from scrummaging and set piece lineup perspective. So I think from that perspective, I would hope that Ryan is playing. Wouldn't be overly surprised if Stephen Archer played as well, but I think as I say, I think that's a big concern for Munster Rugby. But I suppose calling it there, Liam, I know we kind of previewed it there, Ulster Rugby, Munster Rugby. Who do you fancy here advancing to the semi-finals?
Yeah, I mean, look, you probably would have to say Ulster are favourites in terms of what they've done this season. They have ultimately finished the season stronger, the regular season, than Munster. They still have a very good home record. But I would just think that there is a performance in Munster. I would just give us by tighter margins, just the bare 3 points. I just think that know how to win tight games almost as well, whereas Ulster still haven't shown us that this season. And that's why almost kind of, I suppose, the heart rules the head.
I'm kind of leaning towards you, but again, there's an awful lot of a performance gap here for Munster to really track back in terms of that Leinster performance for me. I think Ulster may just shade this, but I think Ulster will give opportunities for Munster, and I think it's really down to Munster Rugby's cohesion and skill set, particularly in the back line, to be far improved than they were against Leinster Rugby in terms of their kind of line breaks and their kind of direct running style. I'm just going to give it to Ulster Rugby just based on home field advantage here, but I think, as you say yourself, I don't think this will blow up by any stretch, but I think maybe Ulster by 3 points. And again, it's this whole project. Dan McFarlane, it's firmly in place in Ulster Rugby. You have Johan van Graan leaving for Bath Rugby as well. Just wonder here, is that a motivating factor for Ulster to continue on their journey here with Dan McFarlane? So I think that edge may go to Ulster. We go then to Saturday, and we go to the Bloemfontein, the Loftus Veerveld. Vodacom Bulls against the South Sea Sharks. I'm really looking forward to this one, Liam, just in terms of the pack battle and the set piece. Who do you fancy in this one?
Oh, it's going to be absolutely ferocious, I don't know who you like your pack battles, and you're going to get that.
I love my pack
of all
battles,
the games this weekend, that's going to be the one to watch for sure. Wow, it's going to be incredible. There's so many highly rated young players coming through at the Bulls, whereas the Sharks, it's funny, have all the Springboks, the established guys. The Bulls are almost in a lot of positions the heir apparents to them. Yeah. So you could never write off the Bulls, obviously, at home, and at altitude as well. It makes such a huge difference. I have looked this season at the Sharks, and I've just felt they are less than the sum of their parts rather than more than the sum of their parts. They have produced very good performances. There's no linking between them and the back line, which contains the likes of Makazole Mapimpi and Lucanio Am in it. So It doesn't make much sense, but it just hasn't worked out. They also have a pretty average number 10. And you don't really win too much with an average number 10 either. Whereas the Bulls, I have felt this season, you've had the Bulls, the Sharks, the Lions, and the Stormers, I felt the Bulls even potentially have more of an all-round game to go far in this competition. I would say the Bulls probably, I give them by like 6-7 points.
Yeah, I think I'll go with you on that. I think just based on the regular season form, I would definitely be going for the Bulls. I was very impressed by them, particularly when Munster were down in Bloemfontein, particularly in that URC fixture in March. I thought they were very impressive for about 60 minutes of that game. Just in terms of their cohesion, their pack, they just have complete standouts, like I could say. Morney Stain as well. They've an awful lot of experienced guys there that will, in a playoff environment, relish that opportunity. Whereas, as you said, the South Sea Sharks, it's not the time for maybe an indifferent halfback combination to be put under pin of their collar away from home in a quarterfinal of a competition. So I think for me, the Bulls, you have Botha as well. Yeah, for me, I think the Bulls are really kind of more set up here for a longer stay in this competition. Now, the Sharks did impress me when Connacht went down to South Africa. I thought, geez, if they could just get the cohesion right in terms of their pack play in the second half, blew Connacht away, and really link up their racks, who are phenomenal. But I think the fact of the matter is, this is not the time now. I mean, all that cohesion stuff should have been ironed out months ago. I think Bulls, strong by 7-10. And then we continue down the DH Stormers against Edinburgh Rugby. So Edinburgh travelled down to South Africa. Do you give any chance Edinburgh Rugby of causing an upset here against the Stormers, who are second seeds?
No, not by a long shot. I think this could be a kind of a big scoreline for the Stormers. This is kind of a bonus try territory if you need it, which you don't, because it's a knockout game, But it's going to be another one of those Evan Royce huge carrying performances, and Haaland and Libok just running that back line. Jeez, I could see, to be honest, I could see like something like a 25-point winning margin in this one. I can't see any sort of real indicators that Edinburgh are going to come anywhere near close to them, really.
It's a daunting task, particularly with the Stormers, who are on an upward curve here, I think, and particularly their home form has been so strong. I mean, Edinburgh do play a lovely brand of rugby, but again, I think it's that expansive brand of football could literally work against them here against the Stormers, and I don't see their pack. Maybe their pack is their secret weapon here, Edinburgh, to a certain extent, but that can only get them so far. I think for me, just probably maybe the most clear cut of the games. I think along with Leinster, Glasgow, I think Stormers probably 17-20 points here win. I think after maybe kind of a cagey enough start, but I think Stormers, if they can, get enough ball from their pack here, I say Libok has just been absolutely phenomenal. He's making things happen for the Stormers, and again, second seeds. Be a massive disappointment for the Stormers if they were upset here by Edinburgh, given all the hard work that's been gone on here behind the scenes with the Stormers in recent weeks. And I suppose finally Leinster Rugby coming off that heartbreaking loss against La Rochelle, but given probably it's going to be your squad players probably fronting up a bit against Glasgow Warriors, do we see any hope for Glasgow Warriors here in the RDS?
Well, yeah, I suppose more so than if Leinster won, in the sense of Leinster, the morale is a bit down. Their players must be a lot of them must be just actually dead on their feet still. I know probably Furlong and Sexton are out. It's questionable for some of the other players who would have played close to 80 minutes, whether they should be given that and just let it get out of their system. So I think, it could be quite a tough day in the first half for Leinster to finally get going. I think they would click a bit in the second half. I'd be kind of saying something like maybe 15 points, 15-point winning margin for Leinster in the end.
Yeah. I'm with you. I think there might be a struggle at the start. I think this is where Glasgow really have to kind of really hit Leinster hard, particularly in the first quarter, and really try to establish a nice little advantage. They definitely do have the players on their day to provide that expansive play to cause Leinster problems, but I think there's a few squad players here that may give Leo Cullen, Stuart Lancaster a message of intent that I was the guy really to be maybe on that 23-man squad. I'm thinking of likes of the Ryan Bairds here, the Kieran Frawleys, guys like that didn't really get any game time in the final. They'll have a point to prove. Soraka's, the Scott Pennies. I think they will have more than enough, but I think maybe that second, third quarter is a bit too much for Glasgow. I would be with you there, Liam. I think maybe kind of a 10, 15 point, maybe it's a workman-like performance of Leinster to kind of get rid of the hangover here. But again, maybe apart from maybe Munster Rugby here, I think we're probably looking at maybe home wins on the other three fixtures, are we, Liam? Looks like it.
Yeah, I would certainly say that, definitely. I'd say the others are kind of pretty much parked, I'd say, as results, yeah.
Exactly. And the way the semi-finals are working, ladies and gentlemen, is that semi-final 1, the winners of Leinster Rugby Glasgow Warriors will be host to Vodafone Bulls or the South Sea Sharks. And then in semi-final 2, the DH Stormers or Edinburgh will be hosting either Ulster Rugby or Munster Rugby. I mean, Liam, we mentioned this before, the whole kind of financial ramifications of a playoff run in the URC. Again, if Munster were to get a win in Kingspan next Friday night or this Friday night, then it's a kind of a case of having to go on the road again. So again, vital revenue streams being lost here for Munster Rugby. So I suppose the first things first have to get to Kingspan. But again, that loss against Leinster Rugby, in the last round of fixtures in the URC really is kind of bite home in terms of the financial balance sheet. And I suppose, Liam, before we leave, there has been some contract news in the Irish provinces, particularly around Ulster and Munster. And I suppose Keith Earls kind of resigning for that 1-year extension. Great news for Munster Rugby. And, Ulster may have produced an absolute gem of a signing there as well, the New Zealander arriving in.
Yeah, he's exactly the type of guy, Tumanga Allen, that we need, quite frankly.
Yes.
Of all the signings that it would be to get, which we probably won't get now because they have Alatoa at Leinster and they now have Tumanga Allen. So no chance of us getting a tied up prop, it seems, this season. But he's a tremendous signing on a 1-year contract. Ex-All Black was at Wasps last season, and his highlights reel is just something to behold completely in terms of broken field play and in terms of he's a very destructive scrummager. In terms of Earls, I'm so delighted for the guy, He's still at the top of his game. He's got the 1-year contract as an IRFU contract, and obviously if Munster want, they can give him another contract at the end of next season. So he's up to the Rugby World Cup. He certainly will be in the mix for that squad.
Exactly. I think with Allen and Ulster Rugby, I think that's a phenomenal signing. Just given 2023, it's a World Cup year. These Irish players in the Irish provinces will be spending an awful lot of time in Carton House, in the Performance Centre. From Ulster, they have an absolute gem of a forward to literally front up and, get the workload in essentially in these URC regular season games. And I think Keith Earls, God, what unbelievable servant to the province. And as you say, Liam, his performance levels remain sky high. Again, an absolute astute footballer, game reader, game management extraordinaire. He tries out of absolutely nothing. And again, it's great to have a guy like that in the dressing room, helping the academy guys, particularly in the back line, thinking of the likes of the Shane Daly's, the Calvin Nashes of this world, imparting that knowledge again onto these guys, the next generation that are coming in. So I think from that perspective, for Munster, it's a very shrewd move, very similar to the Simon Zebo kind of signing last season, that you do have these established guys there. And who knows as well, Liam, it could be a case of Keith Earls really maybe kind of joining kind of maybe the academy or, doing some coaching there on the side as well towards the latter end of next season, particularly with Graham Rowntree around. I think Graham Rowntree knows the value of a Keith Earls, that bring, a character of Keith Earls into a dressing room. So, no, I'm delighted with that news as well. Liam, we'll leave it there anyway. Again, I think that was a great review in terms of the Champions Cup final. Commiserations to Leinster, but massive congratulations to La Rochelle, Ronan O'Gara, Donncha Ryan on that triumph. And I think the URC action, I think we've kind of predicted here, but that maybe a fixture here that we just will be talking about next week. Until then, Liam, thanks very much.
Okay, fun.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. If you liked what you heard in this podcast, why not subscribe to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast on either Amazon, Spotify, YouTube or Twitter platforms. You can also follow me at Hawkeye Sidekick on Facebook and Twitter for the latest sporting opinions, articles and reports.